Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Snack Time with a Dollop of Read Aloud. And today is actually our last, our last reading of Number the Stars together. So this will be our final day of hearing this amazing story. Again, this is Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, with permission granted by Houghton Mifflin Publishing for me to be able to share this book with you. So, when we last were with Anne-Marie, we discovered what Uncle Heinrich meant when he told Anne-Marie that sometimes it's important to only know a little bit of the truth in order for you to stay brave. And I was reading your comments, and you were really pretty spot on with your thinking. Because sometimes if you know too much, then you start to think about all the things that could possibly happen or go wrong. And as a result, you might look a little suspicious. It might be harder for you to kind of pretend like you don't know. So by really not knowing, it made it easier for Anne-Marie to pretend that or to seem like she didn't know what was going on, because in truth, she did not know what was going on. She did not know what was in the basket. She did not know what was in the envelope. She didn't know any of it. So her not knowing actually protected her. Her not knowing actually got her away from the soldiers and allowed her to complete her mission, giving Uncle Heinrich the very special packet that he was so grateful for. In fact, he told Anne-Marie that because of her, the mission will now be a success and the rescue mission will go off the way it's supposed to. So that's a pretty big deal. So how about we jump back into the story and we pick up where we left off. Chapter 16. I will tell you just a little. Chapter 16. Here we go. Poor Blossom, Uncle Heinrich said, laughing after dinner that evening. It was bad enough that your mother was going to milk her after all those years of city life. But Anne-Marie, to do it for the very first time, I'm surprised Blossom didn't kick you. Mama laughed too. She sat in a comfortable chair that Uncle Heinrich had moved from the living room and placed in a corner of the kitchen. Her leg, in a clean white cast to the knee, was on a footstool. Anne-Marie didn't mind their laughing. It had been funny. When she had arrived back at the farmhouse, she had run along the road to avoid the soldiers who might still be in the woods. Now, carrying nothing, she was in no danger. Mama and Kirsty were gone. There was a note hastily written for Mama that the doctor was taking her in his car to the local hospital, that they would be back soon. But the noise from Blossom, forgotten and unmilked, uncomfortable in the barn, had sent Anne-Marie warily out with the milking bucket. So the cow was kind of like when you know that sound you make when you get a tummy ache, that like, why did I eat so much candy? Like that kind of sound. That was the sound the cow was making. So just imagine if she could hear it from inside the house, how loud that cow was mooing or complaining. She had done her best, trying to ignore Blossom's irritated snort and tossing head, remembering how Uncle Heinrich's hands had worked with the firm, rhythmic pulling motion, and she had milked. I could have done it, Kirsty announced. You only had to pull and it squirts. I could do it easily. Anne-Marie rolled her eyes. I'd like to see you try, she thought. Is Ellen coming back? Kirsty asked, forgetting about the cow for a moment. She said she'd make me a dress for my doll. Anne-Marie and I will help you make a dress, Mama told her. Ellen had to go with her parents. Wasn't that a nice surprise? That the Rosens came to get her last night? She could have waked me up and said goodbye, Kirsty grumbled, spooning some imaginary food into the painted mouth of the doll she had propped in the chair beside her. Anne-Marie, Uncle Heinrich said, getting up from the table and pushing back his chair. If you come with me now to the barn, I'll give you a milking lesson, but you need to wash your hands first. Me too? Kirsty asked. No, not you two, Mama said. Not this time. I need your help here since I can't walk very well. You have to be my nurse. Kirsty hesitated, deciding whether to argue. Then she said, I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up, not a cow milker. So I have to stay here and take care of Mama. Followed as usual by the kitten, Anne-Marie walked with Uncle Heinrich to the barn through a fine misty rain that had begun to fall. It seemed to her that Blossom shook her head happily when she saw Heinrich and knew that she would be in good hands. She sat on the stacked hay and watched while he milked, but her mind was not on milking. "Uncle Heinrich," she asked, "where are the Rosens and the others? I thought you were taking them to Sweden on your boat, but they weren't there." "Oh, they were there," he told her, leaning forward against the cow's broadside. "You shouldn't know this. You remember that I told you it was safer for you not to know everything. But," he went on, as his hands moved with their sure and practiced motion, "I will tell you just a little bit, because you were so very brave." "Brave?" Anne-Marie asked, surprised. "No, I wasn't. I was very frightened." "You risked your life." "But I didn't even think about that. I was only thinking about—" He interrupted her, smiling. "That's all that brave means. Not thinking about the danger. Just thinking about what you must do. Of course, you were frightened. I was too. But you kept your mind on what you had to do. So did I. Now, let me tell you about the Rosens. Many of the fishermen have built hidden places in their boat, and I have too. Down underneath, I only have to lift the boards in the right place, and there is a place for a few people to hide. Peter and the others in the resistance who work with them bring them to me, and to the other fishermen as well. There are people who hide them and help them along the way to Gilles." Anne-Marie was startled. "Peter's in the resistance? Of course, I should have known. He brings Mama and Papa that secret newspaper, De Friedanskis, and he always seems to be on the move. I should have figured this out myself." "He is a very, very brave young man, Anne-Marie," Uncle Heinrich said. "They all are." Anne-Marie frowned, remembering the empty boat that morning. Were the Rosens and the others there? Then, just underneath, when I brought the basket? Uncle Heinrich nodded. "I heard nothing," Anne-Marie said. "Of course not. They had to be absolutely quiet for many hours. The baby was drugged so it wouldn't wake or cry." "Could they hear me when I talked to you?" "Yes. Your friend Ellen told me later that she heard you, and they heard the soldiers who came to search the boat." "Soldiers came?" Her eyes widened. She asked, "I thought they went the other way after they stopped me." "There are many soldiers in Gilles. I destroy these names all the time. And all along the coasts. They are searching all the boats now. They know that the Jews are escaping, but they are not sure how. And they rarely find them. The hiding places are carefully concealed, and often we pile dead fish on the deck as well. They hate getting those shiny boots dirty." His head turned towards her again and grinned. Anne-Marie remembered the shiny boots confronting her on the dark path. "Uncle Heinrich," she said, "I'm sure you are right that I shouldn't know everything, but please, would you tell me about the handkerchief? I knew it was important, the packet, and that's why I ran through the woods to make sure you got it. But I thought maybe it was a map. How could a handkerchief, just a handkerchief, be important?" He set the pail aside and began to wash the cow's udder with a damp cloth. "Very few people know about this, Anne-Marie. But the soldiers are so angry about the escaping Jews and the fact that they can't find them that now they have started to train their dogs to smell them, to look for them." "They had dogs, the one who stopped me on the path." "The dogs are trained to sniff about and find where people are hidden. It happened just yesterday on 2 boats. Those dogs, they go right through the dead fish and they find the human scent." We were all very, very worried. We thought it meant the end of the escape to Sweden by boat. It was Peter who took the problem to scientists and doctors. Some very fine minds have worked day and night trying to find the solution, and they have created a special drug. I don't know what it is, but it was in the handkerchief. It attracts the dogs, and then when they sniff it, it ruins their sense of smell. Imagine that. Anne-Marie remembered how the dogs had lunged at the handkerchief, smelled it, and then turned away. Now, thanks to Peter, we will have such a handkerchief. Each boat captain. When the soldiers board our boats, we will simply pull the handkerchief out of our pockets. The Germans will probably think we have bad colds. The dogs will sniff the handkerchief we are holding, and then roam the boat and find nothing. They will smell nothing. Did they bring dogs to your boat this morning? Yes. Not 20 minutes after you had gone. I was about to pull away from the dock when the soldiers appeared and ordered me to halt. They came aboard, searched, and found nothing. But then, of course, I had the handkerchief. If I had not... Oh, well, his voice trailed off and he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. If she had not found the packet where Mr. Rosen had dropped it, if she had not run through the woods, if the soldiers had not taken the basket, if she had not reached into the boat in time, all of the ifs whirled in Anne-Marie's head. They're safe in Sweden now? She asked. You're sure? Uncle Heinrich stood and patted the cow's head. I saw them ashore. There were people waiting to take them to shelter. They are quite safe there now. But what if Nazis invade Sweden? Will the Rosens have to run again? That won't happen. For reasons of their own, the Nazis want Sweden to remain free. It's very complicated. Anne-Marie's thoughts turned to her friends, hiding under the deck of the Ingeborg. It must have been awful for them, so many hours there. Was it dark in the hiding spot? It was dark and cold. And very, very cramped. And Mrs. Rosen was seasick. Even though we were not on the water long, it's a short distance, and you know. It's a short distance, as you know. But they are a courageous people, and none of that mattered when they stepped ashore. The air was fresh and cool in Sweden. The wind was blowing. The baby was beginning to wake as I said goodbye to them. I wonder if I'll ever see Ellen again, Anne-Marie said sadly. You will, little one. You saved her life after all. Someday you will find her again. Someday the war will end. They always end. And then you will be reunited. Now then, he added, stretching, that was quite a milking lesson, was it not? Uncle Heinrich, Anne-Marie shrieked, and then began to laugh. Look, she pointed, the god of thunder has fallen into the pail of milk. All right, here we go. Chapter 17. This is pretty short, so we'll just add this one on. The final chapter. All this long time. Chapter 17. The war would end. Uncle Heinrich had said that, and it was true. The war ended almost 2 long years later. Anne-Marie was now 12. Church bells rang all over Copenhagen early that May evening. The Danish flag was raised everywhere. People stood in the streets and wept as they sang the national anthem of Denmark. Oh, I'm getting chills. Anne-Marie stood on the balcony of the apartment with her parents and sister and watched up and down the streets and cross on the other side. She could see flags and banners in almost every window. She knew that many of those apartments were empty for nearly 2 years now. Neighbors had tended the plants and dusted the furniture and polished the candlesticks for the Jews who had fled. Her mother had done so for the Rosens. It's what friends do, Mama had said. Now neighbors had entered each unoccupied waiting apartment, opened a window and hung a symbol of freedom there. This evening, Mrs. Johansson's face was wet with tears. Kirsty, waving a small flag, sang. Her blue eyes were bright. Even Kirsty was growing up. No longer was she a light-hearted chatterbox of a child. Now she was taller, more serious, and very thin. She looked like the pictures of Liesel at 7 in the old album. Peter Nielsen was dead. It was a painful fact to recall on this day when there was so much joy in Denmark. But Anne-Marie forced herself to think of her red-headed almost brother, and how devastating the day was when they received the news that Peter had been captured and executed by the Germans in the public square at Rivigen in Copenhagen. He had written a letter to them from prison that night before he was shot. It had said simply that he loved them, that he was not afraid, and that he was proud to have done what he could for his country and for the sake of all free people. He had asked in his letter to be buried beside Liesel. But even that was not to be for Peter. The Nazis refused to return the bodies of the young men that were shot at Rivagem. They simply buried them where they were killed and marked the graves only with numbers. Later, Anne-Marie had gone to the place with her parents, and they laid flowers there on the bleak, numbered ground. That night, Anne-Marie's parents told her the truth about Liesel's death at the beginning of the war. She was part of the resistance, Papa had explained. Part of the group that fought for our country in whatever ways they could. We didn't know, Mama added. She didn't tell us. Peter told us after she died. Oh, Papa, Anne-Marie cried. Mama, they didn't shoot Liesel, did they? The way they did Peter in the public square with people watching? Papa shook his head. She was with Peter and the others in a cellar where they had a secret meeting to make plans. Somehow the Nazis found out, and they raided the place that evening. They all ran different ways, trying to escape. Some of them were shot, Mama told her sadly. Peter was shot in the arm. Do you remember that Peter's arm was bandaged in a sling at Liesel's funeral? He wore a coat over it so that no one would notice, and a hat to hide his red hair. The Nazis were looking for him even then. Anne-Marie did remember. She hadn't noticed. The whole day had been a blur of grief. But what about Liesel? If she wasn't shot, what happened? From the military car, they saw her running, and they simply ran her down. So it was true what you said. She was hit by a car? It was true, Papa said. They were all so young, Mama said, shaking her head. She blinked, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a long, deep breath. So very, very young, with so much hope. Now, remembering Liesel, Anne-Marie looked from the balcony down into the street. She saw that below, amid the music, singing and the song of the church bells, people were dancing. It brought back another memory, a memory of Liesel so long ago, wearing the yellow dress, dancing with Peter on the night they had announced their engagement. She turned and went to her bedroom, where the blue trunk still stood in the corner, and, as it had all these years, opening it, Anne-Marie saw that the yellow dress had begun to fade. It was discolored at the edges where it laid, folded for so long. Carefully, she spread open the skirt of the dress and found the place where Ellen's necklace lay hidden in the pocket. The little Star of David still gleamed gold. Papa, she said, returning to the balcony where her father was standing with the others, watching the rejoicing crowd. She opened her hand and showed him her necklace. Can you fix it? I've kept it all this long time. It's Ellen's. Her father took it from her and examined the broken clasp. Yes, he said. I can fix it. When the Rosens come home, you can give it back to Ellen. Until then, Anne-Marie told him, I will wear it myself. So, that is the end of the book. And you should be interested to know that Anne-Marie Johansson was actually inspired by the author's friend named Anneliese Platt, who lived during the time in Copenhagen and was there during the time of German occupation. So Anne-Marie is based on someone who actually went through these events. Now, this book is wonderful. And Mrs. Willis got a little choked up when I was reading it, but that's what good books do. They make you feel what the characters are feeling, and they make you part of the story. So this book is wonderful because of that. So, that being said, today is Friday, and we will be together at our class share, and we can talk about how wonderful this book was. We can also decide together what book we'll read next. But I really want you to share with me what you think of this book in the section below. How you felt about the book, what rating you would give it, how many stars, and I want you to tell me why. Because this book, boys and girls, I was honored to share with you. It is one of my favorites. I love it every year, and I hope that you love it just as much. But if you don't, you can share your opinion as well. But I want you to tell me how many stars you would give it and tell me why. And I can't wait to see you at Share today. So, that being said, I miss you. I love you. Stay safe. I'll see you at 11. Bye, guys.